Hello everyone, welcome to the Boring History channel. Make sure you're subscribed so our daily history reaches you without missing a single story tonight. We travel to ancient Greece, where people feared dreams, trusted omens, and believed the gods watched every step they took. Why did ordinary people accept these strange beliefs as completely normal? And what secrets did they see in the stars, the sea, and even their own sleep? So dim the lights, relax, and let history slowly carry you into a world that feels both familiar and impossibly strange. And before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you truly enjoy the stories I share here. The first thing you notice when stepping into the world of ancient Greece is not the marble temples, the philosophers, or the famous battles. It is how completely ordinary many strange ideas seemed to the people who lived there. Things that would surprise, confuse, or even alarm modern people were accepted without hesitation. The Greeks built one of history's most influential civilizations, created democracy, developed philosophy, studied mathematics, and produced literature that still survives today. Yet they also lived in a world where gods walked among humans. Dreams carried messages from heaven, and invisible forces shaped daily life. To them, these beliefs were not myths or superstitions. They were simply reality. A Greek farmer waking before sunrise might immediately interpret a strange dream as a warning from the gods. If he dreamed of water flooding his house, perhaps Poseidon was angry. If an eagle appeared repeatedly in his sleep, Zeus might be sending a message. Dreams were discussed seriously. Entire books were written to interpret them. People sought experts who specialized in explaining symbols that appeared during the night. Before making important decisions, individuals often considered whether the gods had spoken to them while they slept. Travelers moving across Greece encountered sacred sites, where priests and priestesses interpreted divine signs. One of the most famous was Delphi, where the oracle of Apollo answered questions from kings, generals, and ordinary citizens alike. People traveled enormous distances to hear mysterious statements believed to come directly from a god. Entire wars and political decisions were influenced by these prophecies. Modern people might consult financial advisors or political experts. But ancient Greeks often trusted divine messages delivered through sacred intermediaries. Illness was also understood differently. While Greek physicians developed impressive medical knowledge, many people believed diseases could originate from divine displeasure. If a plague struck a city, citizens searched for religious causes. Perhaps rituals had been neglected. Perhaps a god had been offended. Temples dedicated to healing gods became places where the sick slept in hopes of receiving cures through dreams. Patients described visions in which divine beings instructed them how to recover. The boundary between religion and daily life barely existed. Every meal, journey, harvest, marriage, and military campaign involved rituals. Before sailing, sailors offered sacrifices. Before planting crops, farmers prayed. Before entering battle, generals consulted omens. Even simple household activities could involve offerings to protective spirits. Small shrines stood inside homes, and families maintained relationships with household gods believed to watch over them. Animals often carried special meaning. Birds were especially important because their movements could reveal the intentions of the gods. An eagle flying overhead might be interpreted as a favorable sign. Certain calls, directions of flight, or unusual behavior became messages requiring interpretation. Priests known as augurs observed these signs carefully. What modern observers might call coincidence, the Greeks considered communication from divine forces. Death itself occupied a constant presence in Greek life. The dead were not entirely gone. Ancestors could influence the living, and improper burial might cause spirits to wander restlessly. Families visited graves and made offerings to deceased relatives. They believed that maintaining these connections helped preserve harmony between the worlds of the living and the dead. Funeral rituals were treated with enormous seriousness because neglecting them could bring disaster. Many Greeks accepted the existence of monsters, supernatural creatures, and beings that lived beyond the boundaries of civilization. Satyrs, nymphs, giants, and sea creatures filled stories and landscapes. Certain caves, mountains, and forests possessed reputations as places where supernatural beings resided. Travelers approached these locations cautiously. The line between folklore and reality remained blurred. Even the stars carried meaning. The night sky was not simply a collection of distant objects. Constellations represented heroes, animals, and legendary events. People believed heavenly bodies influenced earthly events. The movements of planets and stars were observed carefully, and celestial events often inspired fear or wonder. Eclipses, comets, and unusual astronomical events could be interpreted as signs of major changes or divine intervention. Marriage practices also differed dramatically from modern expectations. Many girls married during their teenage years, often to older men. Marriages were usually arranged by families rather than based on romantic love. The purpose was to secure alliances, preserve property, and ensure legitimate heirs. Love could develop later, but practical considerations often came first. This arrangement seemed entirely natural within Greek society. Women in many Greek cities lived highly restricted lives. In Athens especially, respectable women spent much of their time within the household. Public life belonged primarily to men. Women managed domestic affairs, supervised servants, and raised children. Their movements could be limited, and participation in politics was virtually non-existent. These restrictions were not universally questioned, because they reflected accepted social values. Exposure of unwanted infants was another practice many Greeks considered normal. If a family could not support a child, or if an infant was born with severe disabilities, the baby might be abandoned. Some abandoned children were rescued and raised by others, while many died. Although the practice appears cruel today, economic realities and social customs made it an accepted part of life in many regions. Slavery formed a fundamental part of Greek society. Enslaved individuals worked in households, farms, workshops, mines, and businesses. Many citizens depended upon slave labor. Philosophers who discussed justice and ethics often accepted slavery as normal. The institution supported the economy and allowed free citizens to participate in politics, education, and public life. Although some individuals questioned aspects of slavery, most Greeks considered it an ordinary feature of society. Physical beauty and athletic ability held extraordinary importance. The human body was celebrated in art, sculpture, and sport. Athletic competitions attracted enormous attention. Victorious athletes became local heroes. The Olympic Games served not merely as sporting events, but as religious festivals honoring the gods. Competitors sometimes performed without clothing, which reflected ideals about physical perfection rather than shame. Education focused heavily on memorization, rhetoric, and public speaking. Young men learned how to persuade audiences because political participation required effective communication. The ability to speak well could determine success in public life. Philosophers debated ideas openly in marketplaces, and intellectual discussion became a respected activity. However, education remained largely unavailable to many women and enslaved people. Greek medicine included practices that appear unusual today. Physicians believed health depended upon balancing bodily fluids known as humours. Blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile supposedly influenced both physical and mental health. Treatments attempted to restore balance through diet, exercise, bloodletting, or other interventions. Despite limited scientific understanding, Greek doctors made important observations that influenced medicine for centuries. Public religious festivals often involved animal sacrifices. Communities gathered as priests slaughtered animals before the gods. Portions of the meat were burned as offerings while the remainder was shared among participants. These ceremonies strengthened social bonds and reinforced religious beliefs. The sight and smell of sacrifice formed a familiar part of public life. Many Greeks believed fate controlled human existence. The moirai, or fates, determined the length and events of every life. Even the gods sometimes respected these forces. People understood that certain outcomes could not be avoided. This belief helped explain suffering, success, and unexpected events. Human beings could strive, struggle, and make choices, but ultimate destiny remained beyond complete control. Hospitality carried sacred importance. Guests had to be welcomed, fed, and protected. Mistreating strangers could anger Zeus himself, who served as protector of travelers and guests. Homes often opened their doors to visitors, because kindness toward strangers represented both moral duty and religious obligation. Violating hospitality rules could bring disgrace. Magic and curses also existed alongside religion. Curse tablets have been discovered throughout the Greek world. Individuals wrote the names of enemies on lead sheets and buried them in graves or sacred places, hoping supernatural forces would harm rivals. Love spells, protective charms, and magical rituals circulated among ordinary people. These practices coexisted with official religion without necessarily creating conflict. The sea inspired both opportunity and terror. Greek communities depended upon maritime trade, yet storms and shipwrecks constantly threatened sailors. The ocean belonged to powerful gods who required respect. Before voyages, sacrifices sought protection. Strange islands, dangerous waters, and unknown creatures filled sailors' stories. Philosophers introduced ideas that challenged traditional beliefs. Yet even great thinkers often accepted concepts that modern audiences find surprising. Some believed the universe consisted of invisible particles. Others proposed that everything was made from 4 elements. Children growing up in ancient Greece learned these beliefs almost as soon as they learned to speak. A child heard stories of gods at the dinner table, saw sacrifices performed in public squares, watched parents pray before journeys, and listened to elders explain unusual events as signs from divine powers. There was no clear separation between mythology and history. Heroes such as Heracles, Achilles, and Odysseus were often treated not simply as fictional characters, but as figures who had genuinely existed in a distant age. Their adventures belonged to the past, just as much as local kings or famous battles. Many Greeks believed that certain families were descended directly from gods. A noble household might trace its ancestry to Zeus, Apollo, or another deity. This ancestry provided status and authority. Kings and rulers frequently claimed divine connections, and ordinary people often accepted such claims. The idea that gods had children with humans seemed entirely reasonable within their understanding of the world. The landscape itself was alive. Rivers possessed spirits. Springs belonged to nymphs. Mountains served as homes of gods. Trees could be sacred. Certain groves were protected because divine beings supposedly lived there. Cutting down a sacred tree or disturbing a holy place risked punishment. Travelers entering unfamiliar territory sometimes offered prayers to local spirits, hoping to avoid offending unseen powers. Thunderstorms inspired particular fear. Lightning was often viewed as a direct expression of Zeus's power. A tree struck by lightning could become sacred. Buildings damaged by lightning might require special rituals. When storms appeared suddenly, many believed the gods were expressing anger or delivering warnings. The sky itself seemed capable of communicating divine intentions. The Greeks also believed that excessive pride could destroy a person. This concept, known as hubris, represented one of their deepest fears. Anyone who became too arrogant, too wealthy, or too successful risked attracting the jealousy of the gods. Countless stories described powerful individuals who fell because they believed themselves equal to divine beings. Success, therefore, required caution. Fortune could disappear quickly if one offended the gods through pride. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and other Greek cities often had different customs, but they shared many religious assumptions. Each city possessed patron gods who protected the community. Athens belonged to Athena, while Sparta honored several deities associated with war and discipline. Public festivals celebrated these divine protectors, and citizens believed the prosperity of their city depended upon maintaining the gods' favor. Many people carried small amulets or protective objects. These items guarded against evil spirits, illness, or misfortune. Certain symbols were thought to possess magical powers. Parents might place protective charms near infants. Sailors carried objects believed to ensure safe voyages. Soldiers entered battle with items meant to bring divine protection. Such practices existed alongside official religion and were accepted throughout society. Sneezing could be interpreted as an omen. Sudden sounds, unusual animal behavior, or accidental words spoken at important moments might carry meaning. If someone spoke of danger and a bird cried overhead at the same moment, people might view the coincidence as a sign. Daily life was filled with interpretations. The universe seemed to communicate constantly through small events. Many Greeks feared the evil eye. Envy and jealousy were believed capable of causing genuine harm. Someone receiving too much admiration or success could attract dangerous attention from others. Protective symbols and rituals attempted to prevent these invisible attacks. Compliments were sometimes accompanied by gestures or words meant to reduce harmful envy. The gymnasium served as far more than a place for exercise. Young men trained physically, discussed philosophy, studied rhetoric, and developed social connections. Physical strength and intellectual development were considered equally important. The ideal citizen possessed both an educated mind and a healthy body. This combination represented excellence and virtue. Spartan society accepted customs that shocked even other Greeks. Spartan boys left their families at a young age to begin military training. They endured hardship, hunger, and strict discipline. The goal was to create fearless soldiers. Stealing food was sometimes tolerated if done skillfully, because it encouraged resourcefulness. Spartan culture valued endurance and obedience above comfort. In many Greek cities, citizens gathered in theatres to watch tragedies and comedies that explored human suffering, divine intervention, and moral choices. Audiences witnessed stories involving murder, revenge, madness, and fate. These performances were not merely entertainment. They formed part of religious festivals and encouraged reflection about human existence. The theatre became a place where society examined its deepest fears and questions. The Greeks often believed emotions themselves could come from divine influence. Sudden anger, love, courage, or fear might result from the actions of gods. If someone fell deeply in love, the influence of Aphrodite could be responsible. Courage in battle might come from Ares or Athena. Human feelings were not always considered entirely personal. Invisible forces shaped the mind and heart. Dream incubation became especially popular in healing sanctuaries. Patients traveled to sacred temples, purified themselves, made offerings, and slept within holy spaces. During sleep, they hoped a god would appear and reveal a cure. Some reported dreams involving surgery performed by divine hands. Others received instructions regarding diets, exercises, or treatments. The experience combined religion, psychology, and medicine. Old age carried both respect and vulnerability. Elders possessed wisdom and experience, but they also depended heavily on family support. There were no modern retirement systems. Children were expected to care for aging parents. Respecting elders formed an important moral duty. Abandoning one's parents could bring public shame. Greek sailors filled the Mediterranean with stories of distant lands inhabited by strange peoples and creatures. Some believed regions existed where men had dog heads, where giant ants collected gold, or where one-eyed giants lived. The unknown edges of the world contained wonders and dangers. Travelers' stories blended observation with imagination, and audiences often accepted these accounts. Even sleep itself had spiritual significance. The Greeks viewed sleep as closely related to death. In mythology, the gods of sleep and death were brothers. Dreams allowed communication between different worlds. Sleeping individuals became vulnerable to divine influence, prophetic visions, or supernatural encounters. The night was not empty darkness, but a time when hidden forces became active. Many people feared dying without proper burial. A body left unburied could leave the soul trapped between worlds. Families therefore worked hard to recover bodies after battles or accidents. Funeral rituals ensured safe passage into the afterlife. Coins were sometimes placed with the dead to pay the ferryman who transported souls across the river, separating life from death. The afterlife itself was often imagined as a shadowy realm where souls existed without the pleasures of earthly life. Only exceptional heroes might reach more blessed regions. Most people expected a quiet existence among the dead. This belief encouraged individuals to seek honor and reputation during life. Because fame could survive after death, public reputation mattered enormously. Honor and shame influenced nearly every aspect of society. A person's standing within the community determined opportunities, marriage prospects, and political influence. Insults could provoke serious conflicts. Defending one's reputation became a social obligation. Families protected their honor across generations. Symposia, or drinking gatherings, played important roles among wealthy men. Guests reclined on couches, drank diluted wine, discussed philosophy, listened to music, and shared stories. These events combined social bonding with intellectual conversation. Excessive drinking was discouraged, but controlled intoxication was considered enjoyable and even educational in certain settings. Music possessed moral power. Different musical styles supposedly influenced character and behavior. Philosophers argued that certain melodies encouraged courage, while others promoted laziness or emotional weakness. Education often included musical training because it was believed to shape the soul. The Greeks frequently practiced divination before military campaigns. Generals examined sacrificed animals, especially their internal organs, searching for signs regarding future success. An unfavorable omen might delay an attack. Soldiers accepted these rituals because they believed the gods revealed their intentions through such methods. Some philosophers questioned traditional religion, but even skeptics usually lived within a deeply religious culture. Debates about the nature of the gods, the soul, and the universe occurred openly. Yet few people completely rejected the existence of divine forces. Instead, they argued about how those forces operated. Earthquakes terrified Greek communities. Since Greece experiences frequent seismic activity, many believed these events resulted from Poseidon's anger. The god was known not only as ruler of the sea, but also as the earth shaker. When the ground trembled, people interpreted the disaster through religious explanations. Agriculture depended heavily upon seasonal cycles, and farmers watched nature carefully. Successful harvests required divine assistance. Many Greeks also believed that madness could come directly from the gods. A person who suddenly behaved strangely, spoke uncontrollably, or acted with unusual energy might be seen as touched by divine forces. Certain forms of insanity were feared, while others were respected. Prophets, priestesses, and oracles sometimes entered trance, like states that appeared irrational to observers. Yet these experiences were considered sacred, because the gods were believed to speak through human beings. The concept of personal freedom was also very different from modern ideas. A man belonged to his family, his city, his traditions, and his gods. Individual desires often came second to duty. Citizens were expected to serve in the military, participate in religious festivals, and support their community. Refusing these responsibilities could lead to shame or punishment. Personal identity was closely connected to one's city and family rather than personal ambitions. Children were raised with stories designed not only to entertain, but also to teach obedience, courage, and respect for the gods. Tales of people who ignored divine commands usually ended in disaster. Kings who became arrogant lost their kingdoms. Warriors who insulted the gods died tragically. These stories reinforced social values and reminded listeners that human beings had limits. The Greeks often believed that beauty reflected moral goodness. Attractive people were sometimes assumed to possess noble qualities, while physical deformities could be associated with misfortune or divine punishment. Although this was not always the case, outward appearance carried strong symbolic meaning. Sculptors idealized the human body because physical perfection represented harmony and balance. Color also held symbolic importance. White animals might be sacrificed to heavenly gods, while darker animals could be offered to deities connected with the underworld. Clothing worn during religious ceremonies often carried special meanings. Certain colors represented mourning, celebration, or purity. These associations shaped rituals and public events. Many Greeks accepted that dreams could predict not only personal events, but also political changes. Leaders sometimes delayed military campaigns because of troubling dreams. Entire cities discussed unusual visions reported by respected citizens. A dream experienced by a king or general might influence thousands of people. The household fireplace carried sacred significance because it represented the goddess Hestia. The fire symbolized family unity and continuity. New homes often received fire from existing family hearths. Colonists founding distant settlements carried sacred flames from their home cities to establish spiritual connections with their origins. The simple act of maintaining a household fire became a religious duty. The Greeks frequently associated certain days with good or bad fortune. Some days were considered favorable for travel, business, or marriage, while others carried negative reputations. Religious calendars determined when ceremonies could occur. Important events were often scheduled according to these beliefs. Oaths carried tremendous power. Swearing by the gods created a sacred obligation. Breaking an oath risked divine punishment in addition to social disgrace. Agreements between cities, families, and individuals often involved religious ceremonies because honesty was believed to be enforced by supernatural powers. Water itself possessed religious importance. Sacred springs attracted pilgrims seeking healing or divine guidance. Before entering temples, worshippers often purified themselves with water. Ritual cleansing removed spiritual pollution that could offend the gods. Rivers and fountains became places where the natural and supernatural worlds met. The Greeks believed certain individuals possessed exceptional favor from the gods. Athletes who repeatedly won competitions, generals who achieved remarkable victories, or poets who created beautiful works might be viewed as specially blessed. Success often indicated divine approval rather than simple talent alone. Even ordinary household objects could carry religious meaning. Doors, thresholds, storage rooms, and kitchens sometimes contained protective symbols. Small offerings of food, wine, or oil maintained relationships with household spirits. Religion existed not only in temples, but also in bedrooms, courtyards, and dining rooms. Many people feared pollution, not in the modern environmental sense, but as a spiritual condition. Contact with death, murder, childbirth, or certain illnesses could create ritual impurity. Individuals sometimes underwent cleansing ceremonies before participating in religious activities. Communities believed that spiritual pollution could spread if ignored. The sea remained one of the greatest sources of uncertainty. A voyage that began under clear skies could end in disaster within hours. Since sailors lacked modern navigation tools and weather forecasts, divine explanations made sense. Storms seemed like expressions of supernatural anger, while safe journeys indicated divine protection. Sailors returning home often dedicated gifts to the gods in gratitude. Greek soldiers entered battle believing the gods watched the outcome. Victory demonstrated divine favor, while defeat suggested displeasure. Before battles, sacrifices were performed and omens examined. If signs appeared unfavorable, commanders sometimes postponed attacks. Morale depended not only on weapons and training, but also on religious confidence. People also believed that spoken words possessed power. Curses, blessings, prayers, and prophecies could influence reality. Poets were respected because language itself seemed capable of affecting both human emotions and divine attention. A well-spoken prayer might gain favor from the gods, while careless words could invite trouble. Foreigners fascinated the Greeks. Travelers returning from Egypt, Persia, or distant lands brought stories of unfamiliar customs. Some foreign practices seemed strange while others were admired. Yet many Greeks believed their own culture occupied a special place in the world. Non-Greeks were often called barbarians, a term referring to those who did not speak Greek. Language became an important marker of identity. Old ruins and ancient monuments inspired legends. If people encountered massive walls or abandoned structures whose builders had long disappeared, they sometimes believed giants or heroes had created them. The distant past seemed populated by larger, than life figures possessing abilities beyond ordinary humans. The Greeks did not separate religion from politics. Public officials participated in rituals, and important decisions often involved religious ceremonies. New laws could be announced during festivals. Military victories led to religious celebrations. Temples stored wealth and served as important civic centers. Religion formed part of government itself. Sacred animals enjoyed special treatment. Owls became associated with Athena, dolphins with Apollo, and eagles with Zeus. Encountering these creatures under unusual circumstances could be interpreted as a divine sign. Animals occupied symbolic roles that extended beyond their practical importance. The fear of offending the dead remained strong. Families visited graves regularly, offered food and drink, and maintained burial sites. Neglected ancestors could become restless spirits. Remembering the dead strengthened family identity and preserved connections across generations. People often interpreted coincidence as meaningful. Meeting a certain person before an important event, hearing particular words unexpectedly, or encountering unusual weather could all carry significance. The universe appeared interconnected. Events did not happen randomly, but reflected hidden patterns and divine intentions. The Greeks also believed that excessive happiness could be dangerous. Someone enjoying too much success or prosperity might attract envy from both humans and gods. Moderation became a virtue because extremes often ended badly. Wealth, power, and fame required careful management. Festivals interrupted ordinary life throughout the year. Citizens attended processions, competitions, sacrifices, and performances. Businesses closed, and entire communities gathered to honor their gods. These celebrations reinforced social bonds and reminded people of their shared traditions. Religion was not limited to private belief, but involved collective participation. Even silence could possess meaning. Sacred places often required respectful behavior. Certain rituals demanded quiet observation. Individuals seeking divine guidance sometimes spent time in solitude or contemplation. The absence of noise could create opportunities for spiritual experiences. Many Greeks believed that heroes continued to influence the living after death. Shrines dedicated to legendary figures attracted worshippers seeking protection or assistance. Heroes occupied a position between gods and humans, possessing powers that survived beyond the grave. The changing seasons reflected divine activity. Spring represented renewal and fertility, while winter suggested absence and decline. Agricultural myths explained these cycles through stories involving gods and goddesses. Nature itself became a living expression of supernatural forces. What modern people often call superstition formed an ordinary part of Greek reasoning. Their world contained invisible powers, sacred places, divine messages, and spiritual dangers. These beliefs provided explanations for uncertainty and suffering, while creating a sense of order within an unpredictable world. When an ancient Greek mother worried about her child's illness, a farmer watched dark clouds gather above his fields. A sailor prepared to cross dangerous waters. The Greeks also believed that music could literally change a person's character. Certain melodies were thought to encourage bravery, while others supposedly made people weak, emotional, or lazy. Philosophers argued about which musical instruments should be allowed in education, because they believed sounds shaped the soul itself. A child listening to the wrong kind of music could develop poor morals, while proper music created discipline and virtue. To them, music was not merely entertainment, but a force capable of influencing human behavior. Laughter also carried deeper meaning. Excessive laughter was sometimes viewed with suspicion because it suggested a loss of self-control. Moderation was considered one of the highest virtues. Whether eating, drinking, speaking, or celebrating, a person was expected to maintain balance. The Greeks admired self-control because they believed uncontrolled emotions could lead to disaster. Many people believed that certain places acted as boundaries between the human world and the divine world. Deep caves, isolated mountains, ancient groves, and dark springs often became sacred sites. People entered these locations carefully because they believed supernatural beings lived there. Strange sounds inside caves or sudden winds in forests could easily be interpreted as signs of invisible powers. The moon inspired both fascination and fear. Changes in its appearance seemed connected to human behavior, fertility, agriculture, and the movement of time itself. Farmers watched the moon before planting crops. Religious festivals followed lunar calendars. The night sky provided not only beauty but also guidance for everyday life. Many Greeks feared being forgotten after death more than death itself, Physical life eventually ended, but memory could survive. A person's name, reputation, and achievements allowed them to live on in the minds of future generations. This desire for lasting fame motivated soldiers, athletes, poets, and leaders. The worst fate was not necessarily dying, but disappearing completely from human memory. The Greeks often interpreted unusual births as signs from the gods. Children born with physical differences might be viewed as carrying special meaning, either positive or negative. Rare natural events such as two-headed animals, unusual weather, or strange celestial events could become important omens discussed by entire communities. Silence during religious ceremonies was extremely important. Participants believed the gods listened carefully, and improper behavior could offend them. Temples often created an atmosphere of seriousness and respect. Entering sacred spaces required preparation, because people believed they were approaching powerful beings. The concept of luck was closely connected to divine favor. Success rarely seemed accidental. A wealthy merchant, a victorious athlete, or a fortunate farmer might be considered blessed by the gods. Likewise, repeated misfortune could indicate divine displeasure. People constantly searched for reasons behind good and bad fortune. The Greeks also believed that sleep restored not only the body but the soul. Dreams served as bridges between the mortal world and the divine world. People discussed their dreams with friends and family, searching for hidden meanings. Some dreams were ignored, but others were treated with great seriousness, especially if they seemed unusually vivid or symbolic. Many Greeks feared crossroads, particularly at night. Intersections between roads sometimes carried spiritual significance because they represented places where different paths and different worlds met. Offerings could be left at crossroads to gain protection or avoid bad luck. Travelers moving through isolated areas after dark often felt vulnerable to supernatural forces. The smell of incense, burning offerings, and sacrificed animals filled many public spaces. Religious life was not silent or invisible. Temples contained smoke, music, prayers, and crowds of worshippers. Festivals brought processions through city streets. Religion surrounded people through sights, sounds, and smells every day. Certain numbers carried symbolic meanings. Some numbers were associated with harmony, perfection, or divine order. Philosophers like the followers of Pythagoras believed mathematics revealed the hidden structure of the universe. Numbers were not simply tools for counting, but keys to understanding reality itself. Many Greeks accepted that the gods could disguise themselves as ordinary humans. A stranger asking for food might actually be Zeus testing human kindness. An elderly traveler could be a goddess in disguise. This belief reinforced hospitality because anyone might secretly possess divine identity. Natural disasters often became moral lessons. Floods, earthquakes, droughts, and plagues were not viewed as random events. People searched for human actions that might have caused divine anger. Communities performed rituals, offered sacrifices, and sought forgiveness in hopes of restoring balance. Time moved in cycles rather than straight lines. Seasons returned, festivals repeated, generations followed one another, and myths connected the present with the distant past. The Greeks saw themselves as participants in an ongoing pattern rather than citizens of a constantly progressing world. Many people believed the soul survived death in some form. Philosophers debated exactly what happened after death, but few believed human existence ended completely. Some imagined shadowy realms beneath the earth, while others proposed cycles of rebirth. These ideas shaped how people understood morality and human purpose. The Greeks admired wisdom, but wisdom often meant recognizing one's limitations. One famous idea stated that humans should know themselves. Understanding personal weaknesses, accepting mortality, and respecting the gods represented true intelligence. Those who believed themselves greater than fate or equal to the gods usually suffered terrible consequences in stories and legends. Even ordinary meals contained religious elements. Before eating, small offerings might be made. Wine could be poured onto the ground for the gods. Important gatherings often included prayers. The divine world remained present during daily activities that modern people consider entirely secular. Weather itself seemed alive. Gentle rain could represent blessing, while violent storms suggested anger. Droughts caused fear because they threatened survival. Since agriculture depended heavily upon natural conditions, people naturally connected weather to divine powers. Certain professions carried religious significance. Blacksmiths worked with fire and metal, which seemed almost magical. Healers dealt with life and death. Priests interpreted divine signs. Poets received inspiration from the muses. Many occupations involved relationships with supernatural forces. The Greeks often accepted contradictions without discomfort. A person could believe in rational philosophy while also consulting an oracle. A physician might practice medicine while praying to healing gods. Scientific observation and religious faith existed together because they answered different questions about the world. Children learned courage through stories of heroes who faced monsters, endured suffering, and accepted fate. These stories provided examples of proper behavior. Heroes were not perfect. Many made mistakes, suffered losses, and experienced tragedy. Their struggles reflected the difficulties of human life. The passing of comets, eclipses, and unusual celestial events often created fear, because the heavens were believed to reflect conditions on Earth. If the sky changed unexpectedly, people assumed important events would soon follow. Kings, generals, and priests paid close attention to the heavens. The Greeks also believed that words spoken by dying people carried special power. Final statements could become prophecies or warnings. Death placed individuals close to the boundary between worlds, making their words especially important. In many ways, ancient Greek life was filled with uncertainty. Crops could fail, wars could begin suddenly, diseases could spread rapidly, and storms could destroy ships without warning. Without modern science, technology, or medicine, people searched for meaning and control through religion, tradition, and ritual. These beliefs provided comfort, explanations, and guidance. To a modern observer, the ancient Greek world may seem filled with superstition, but to the people living within it, these ideas created order in an unpredictable universe. Gods explained natural forces. Fate explained suffering. Rituals offered protection. Omens provided guidance. Ancestors gave continuity. Heroes inspired courage. A Greek citizen, walking home at sunset, might stop at a small shrine, offer a brief prayer, remember a dream from the previous night, worry about an eclipse approaching next month, discuss a prophecy heard in the marketplace, and thank the gods for a successful harvest. None of these actions felt unusual. They were simply part of life. The same civilization that gave the world philosophy, mathematics, theatre, and democracy also believed that owls could carry divine messages, that dreams revealed the future, that gods walked among humans, and that fate controlled the destiny of every person. These beliefs existed side by side, not as contradictions, but as parts of a single worldview. For the ancient Greeks, the world was never empty or silent. The wind might carry a message. The stars might reveal a warning. A stranger could be a god. A dream could predict tomorrow. A sacrifice could change destiny. The dead still remembered the living, and the gods watched every action. And perhaps that is why so many of their stories have survived for thousands of years. The Greeks also believed that certain moments of the day carried special importance. Dawn represented renewal and divine blessing, while twilight often belonged to uncertainty and hidden forces. As darkness covered the land, many people became cautious. Night was not simply the absence of sunlight. It was a period when spirits moved, dreams arrived, and the boundary between the human world and the unseen world became thinner. Travellers avoided lonely roads after sunset whenever possible, and families gathered inside their homes, protected by the sacred fire burning in the centre of the household. Many Greeks thought that emotions themselves came from outside the body. Love might strike suddenly because a god had intervened. Fear before battle could be sent by supernatural forces. Courage might descend upon a soldier like a gift from the heavens. A person did not always feel completely responsible for their own emotions, because the gods constantly influenced human thoughts and desires. This belief made life feel like a partnership between human effort and divine intervention. The elderly often served as living libraries. Since books were expensive and literacy was limited in many places, stories, traditions, and knowledge passed from one generation to another through memory. Grandparents told myths, explained customs, and described events from long ago. Remembering the past became a responsibility. Forgetting traditions could anger the gods and weaken the community. The Greeks also considered balance to be one of the most important qualities in life. Too much wealth, too much pride, too much ambition, or even too much happiness could become dangerous. They believed that nature itself sought balance, and that people who pushed beyond proper limits invited disaster. Many tragedies begin with someone who wants more power, greater fame, or unlimited success. The audience already knew what would happen, because the Greeks believed that excess almost always led to destruction. Many households kept small statues of gods inside their homes. These figures were not decorations. They represented divine protection. Families prayed to them before important events, offered food or wine, and asked for guidance during difficult times. Religion lived inside kitchens, courtyards, bedrooms, and workshops. One did not need to visit a large temple to speak to the gods. The Greeks were fascinated by signs in nature. The sudden appearance of a snake, the behavior of birds, the direction of the wind, or an unusual cloud formation could all carry meaning. Nature itself seemed to speak. Since the gods controlled the world, every unusual event potentially contained a message. People learned to observe carefully because hidden warnings could appear anywhere. A person's name also carried importance. Names often honored ancestors, heroes, or gods. Children might be named after grandparents to preserve family memory. Some names reflected desirable qualities such as strength, wisdom, or beauty. The continuation of a family name represented a form of immortality because descendants carried the memory of earlier generations. Many Greeks feared loneliness because humans were believed to belong within families and communities. Living alone was uncommon and often viewed negatively. Families shared homes, meals, work, and religious responsibilities. Even cities thought of themselves as large families connected through common ancestors and shared gods. When earthquakes struck, entire communities sometimes gathered in temples to pray, since they believed the earth itself could be moved by divine powers. Natural disasters became deeply spiritual experiences. Fear brought people together, reinforcing the belief that human beings depended upon forces beyond their control. The Greeks also admired endurance. Heroes were praised not because they endured it. Odysseus spent years trying to return home. Heracles completed impossible labors. Soldiers survived battles, sailors survived storms, and ordinary people survived hardships. Strength meant continuing despite pain and difficulty. The concept of destiny appeared everywhere. Parents wondered about the future of their children. Kings worried about prophecies. Warriors questioned whether they would survive battle. Yet many Greeks believed that fate had already woven the pattern of every life. Human beings could not escape their destiny, though they often tried. Ironically, attempts to avoid fate frequently caused the predicted events to happen. The Greeks saw old ruins and ancient tombs as reminders that even powerful people eventually disappeared. Great kings, wealthy families, and victorious armies all became memories. This awareness of mortality influenced their philosophy. Since life was temporary, one should seek honor, wisdom, and virtue while time remained. Many people believed that the soul continued to experience emotions after death. The dead could feel neglected if forgotten or honored if remembered. Family rituals therefore maintained relationships between the living and the dead. Annual ceremonies ensured that ancestors remained part of family life. Foreign lands often seemed mysterious and dangerous. Beyond the Greek world lay deserts, vast empires, strange customs, and unknown creatures. Travelers returned with incredible stories that mixed truth and imagination. Since few people traveled great distances, these accounts often became accepted as fact. The world beyond familiar shores seemed filled with wonders and dangers. The Greeks also believed that success carried responsibility. Wealthy citizens were expected to contribute to public life, sponsor festivals, support religious activities, and help their communities. Keeping wealth entirely for oneself could attract criticism. Generosity earned respect and honor. Many people viewed beauty as evidence of harmony within the universe. Proportion, balance, and symmetry appeared in art, architecture, and philosophy. Temples were carefully designed according to mathematical principles because beauty reflected divine order. The same principles that governed the stars supposedly governed human bodies and buildings. Certain professions inspired both admiration and fear. Blacksmiths transformed metal through fire, which seemed almost magical. Midwives assisted during childbirth, a mysterious and dangerous event. Healers attempted to understand illness. Sailors ventured into unpredictable seas. These occupations placed people close to forces that seemed larger than ordinary life. Even silence during a conversation could carry meaning. Pauses might indicate respect, contemplation, or concern. The Greeks valued thoughtful speech because words possessed power. Public speakers trained carefully to persuade audiences, and philosophers debated ideas for hours. Language shaped politics, education, and social life. The changing seasons were understood through mythological stories. Spring returned because divine events allowed life to come back to the earth. Winter represented absence, loss, and waiting. These stories helped explain the rhythms of nature and gave emotional meaning to the passage of time. The Greeks also accepted suffering as part of existence. Life contained illness, loss, war, and death. Their stories rarely promised perfect happiness. Instead, they explored how people responded to hardship. Courage, wisdom, and self-control became important because difficulties were unavoidable. Many people believed that exceptional talent came from divine inspiration. Poets did not simply create verses through skill alone. The muses inspired them. Musicians received gifts from the gods. Artists and thinkers often described their abilities as divine blessings rather than personal achievements. Markets, temples, theatres, and public squares brought people together every day. Conversations about politics, religion, philosophy, and local events filled the air. The exchange of ideas became a normal part of life. Yet even the most intellectual discussions often included references to gods, fate, and tradition. The Greeks frequently looked backward to a heroic age that they believed had existed long before their own time. Heroes were stronger, wiser, and closer to the gods. Modern generations seemed smaller and weaker by comparison. This belief gave ancient traditions enormous authority because they connected people to a glorious past. As children became adults, they participated in ceremonies marking important transitions: marriage, military service, parenthood, and old age. All carried social and religious meaning. Life unfolded through recognized stages, each accompanied by duties and expectations. Even the stars above Greece seemed alive with stories. Constellations represented heroes, monsters, hunters, and gods. Looking into the night sky meant seeing history written among the stars. The heavens reminded people that human life existed within a much larger universe filled with meaning. Perhaps the strangest thing to modern minds is that the Greeks rarely divided life into separate categories. Religion was politics, philosophy was morality, nature was divine, medicine involved dreams. Astronomy included mythology, family obligations connected to religious duties. Everything belonged together. A fisherman pulling nets from the sea, a mother caring for her children, a farmer watching his fields, a soldier polishing his armor, and a philosopher discussing the nature of existence, all lived within the same spiritual universe. Gods watched their actions. Fate shaped their futures. Ancestors remembered them. And nature itself spoke through signs and symbols. To the ancient Greeks, the world was not empty matter moving through space. It was alive. Rivers had spirits. Mountains belonged to gods. Dreams carried messages. The dead still mattered. Heroes remained present. Many Greeks also believed that the human body reflected the order of the universe itself. Just as the seasons followed a natural pattern, and the stars moved according to divine laws, the body was expected to remain in balance. Illness did not simply mean something had gone wrong physically. It meant harmony had been disturbed. A person who ate too much, slept too little, experienced excessive emotions, or ignored proper routines could upset this balance. Physicians therefore recommended moderation in food, exercise, sleep, and behavior, because health depended upon living in accordance with nature. The changing of the seasons was deeply emotional for many Greeks. Spring brought hope and fertility. Summer represented abundance. Autumn symbolized harvest, and winter carried thoughts of death and hardship. Farmers watched the skies, winds, and temperatures carefully, because their survival depended upon nature. Since weather could determine whether families ate or starved, divine explanations felt entirely reasonable. A poor harvest was not merely unfortunate. It might indicate that some sacred duty had been neglected. Many Greeks feared sailing beyond familiar waters. The Mediterranean provided trade, food, and travel. But it also contained storms, hidden rocks, pirates, and unpredictable currents. A voyage could begin peacefully and end in disaster. Sailors therefore performed rituals before departure, offered gifts to the gods, and prayed for safe returns. Families waiting at home often visited temples while ships were at sea, asking divine protection for loved ones. The Greeks believed that certain individuals possessed unusual wisdom because they lived closer to the gods. Hermits, prophets, priests, and elderly philosophers sometimes gained reputations for special insight. People travelled long distances to ask questions about marriage, business, illness, or the future. Advice was valued, not only because of knowledge, but because wisdom itself seemed sacred. The sounds of the city carried religious meaning. Temple bells, songs, prayers, and festival music filled the streets. During important celebrations, entire communities participated in processions. Citizens carried statues, sang hymns, and offered sacrifices. Religion was not hidden behind walls. It moved openly through towns and villages, becoming part of everyday life. The Greeks also paid attention to the direction from which winds arrived. Certain winds brought rain, others brought heat, and some were considered dangerous. Winds themselves were sometimes imagined as divine beings with personalities and intentions. Farmers, sailors, and travellers observed them carefully because they affected every aspect of life. People often believed that important events happened for reasons that humans could not immediately understand. A sudden death, an unexpected victory, or an accidental meeting might reveal its meaning only years later. This belief encouraged patience because the gods often worked in mysterious ways. Human beings saw only part of the larger picture. The Greeks greatly respected memory, remembering ancestors, heroic deeds, laws, and traditions preserved society. Forgetting was considered dangerous because it weakened connections to the past. Poets served as guardians of memory, preserving stories that might otherwise disappear. Through songs and poems, ancient events remained alive for future generations. Many households observed rituals at birth. Newborn children represented both joy and uncertainty, because infant mortality was common. Families prayed for protection, introduced children to household gods, and held ceremonies welcoming them into the family. Survival itself was never taken for granted. As children grew older, they learned that life involved duties as well as pleasures. Boys often prepared for military service and public responsibilities. Girls learned household skills and family traditions. Education aimed to produce useful members of society rather than simply provide knowledge. Everyone possessed a role within the larger community. The Greeks frequently compared human life to the natural world. Youth resembled spring. Adulthood resembled summer. Old age resembled autumn. And death resembled winter. These comparisons helped people understand aging and mortality. Since nature itself followed cycles, human life seemed part of a larger pattern. Many people feared offending guests because hospitality was sacred. A traveller requesting food or shelter deserved respect. Since gods might appear disguised as strangers, kindness became both a social duty and a religious obligation. Stories often described people rewarded for generosity or punished for cruelty toward visitors. The Greeks also admired practical intelligence. A person who solved problems creatively earned respect. Heroes succeeded not only through strength, but through cleverness, patience, and strategy. Odysseus became famous because of his mind rather than his physical power alone. Intelligence allowed humans to survive in a difficult world. The passing of time often felt slower than it does today. There were no clocks controlling every hour of the day. Work followed sunlight, weather, and seasons. Conversations lasted longer. Festivals interrupted routines. People spent time in marketplaces discussing ideas or listening to stories. Life moved according to natural rhythms. Many Greeks believed that beauty and goodness were connected. A harmonious face, a well-built body, or elegant architecture reflected deeper qualities. This belief influenced art, sculpture, and education. Creating beauty became a way of expressing order and balance within the world. The sea at night inspired particular fear. Without modern navigation equipment, darkness transformed familiar waters into dangerous places. Strange sounds, distant lights, and sudden storms could easily be interpreted as supernatural signs. Sailors carried stories of sea monsters, angry gods, and mysterious islands. Because the ocean seemed filled with unseen dangers, the Greeks often viewed life as a gift that required gratitude. Offerings, prayers, and sacrifices expressed thanks for harvests, victories, healthy children, and safe journeys. Gratitude maintained good relationships with the gods. Ignoring divine generosity could invite misfortune. Many believed that places remembered what happened within them. Battlefields, temples, tombs, and ancient ruins carried emotional and spiritual significance. Visiting these places connected people to earlier events and generations. The land itself seemed to preserve memory. Philosophers taught that understanding oneself was among the most important goals in life. People should recognize their strengths and weaknesses, accept their limitations, and avoid arrogance. Wisdom involved humility because humans remained mortal and imperfect. Even the greatest heroes eventually died. The Greeks also believed that certain emotions needed control. Anger, jealousy, pride, and greed could destroy individuals and communities. Stories repeatedly warned against allowing these emotions to dominate. Self-discipline became a virtue because uncontrolled passions often led to tragedy. Many people accepted suffering as unavoidable. Illness, war, famine, and death affected nearly everyone. Since hardships could not always be prevented, the important question became how people responded to them. Courage, endurance, and dignity mattered more than avoiding pain entirely. Festivals offered temporary relief from ordinary responsibilities. During celebrations, people ate, drank, sang, watched performances, and participated in games. These events strengthened social bonds and reminded communities that joy remained important despite life's difficulties. The Greeks often imagined the universe as orderly and meaningful. The stars followed predictable paths. Seasons returned each year, and generations succeeded one another. Although life contained uncertainty, they believed hidden order existed beneath apparent chaos. Philosophers searched for this order through reason, while priests sought it through religion. Even old age possessed a certain dignity. Elders carried memories, wisdom, and experience. While physical strength faded, knowledge increased. Younger generations often sought advice from older family members because they had survived many hardships and understood life's complexities. Many Greeks believed that true happiness came not from wealth alone, but from living honorably. A good reputation, loyal friends, healthy children, and respect within the community mattered more than material possessions. Wealth could disappear, but honor might survive long after death. At night, families gathered around lamps and fires, sharing stories that connected them to gods, heroes, and ancestors. Children listened to tales explaining the world around them. These stories taught courage, respect, moderation, and faith. The next generation learned how to live by hearing the experiences of those who came before. As the stars moved above the Greek countryside and waves struck the shores of the Aegean Sea, people lived with a constant awareness that human life was temporary. Kingdoms rose and fell. Cities prospered and declined, and every person eventually faced death. Yet this awareness did not necessarily create despair. Instead, it encouraged people to seek honor, wisdom, friendship, and meaning while life lasted. The ancient Greeks built temples, wrote poetry, studied mathematics, debated philosophy, and sailed across the sea while believing that gods watched from above, fate guided every life, and invisible forces connected all things. To them, these beliefs were not extraordinary. They formed the foundation of existence itself. The Greeks also believed that silence before an important event carried special power. Before a battle, a sacrifice, or a major decision, people often waited quietly, listening for signs or watching for omens. A sudden sound, the movement of a bird, or even an unexpected word spoken by someone nearby could influence what happened next. Life seemed filled with messages waiting to be noticed. Nothing was completely meaningless, because the gods could communicate through the smallest details. Many Greeks feared sudden good fortune, almost as much as they feared bad luck. A man who became wealthy too quickly, a soldier who won too many victories, or a family that experienced too much happiness might begin to worry that the gods would eventually restore balance. Excessive success attracted attention, and attention could bring envy from both humans and divine beings. This belief encouraged modesty. People often avoided boasting because pride could invite disaster. The smell of olive oil, burning wood, sea air, and incense surrounded daily life. Temples contained the smoke of sacrifices. Homes contained the warmth of hearth fires, and markets carried the scent of food and animals. Religious experiences were deeply connected to the senses. Worshippers heard hymns, smelled offerings, touched sacred objects, and watched flames rise toward the sky. Religion was experienced physically as well as spiritually. Many Greeks believed that rivers possessed memories. Water flowed through cities, fields, and mountains, connecting different places and generations. Certain rivers became sacred because myths claimed that gods or heroes had once visited them. People approached these places with respect, believing that divine forces remained present long after the stories themselves had occurred. Children often learned through imitation rather than formal instruction. They watched their parents pray, observed sacrifices, listened to stories, and participated in festivals. Beliefs became normal because they were woven into ordinary routines. A child who saw family members thanking the gods after meals or visiting ancestors' graves naturally accepted these practices as part of life. The Greeks also believed that emotions could spread between people. Fear in one soldier might weaken an entire army. Courage from a leader could inspire hundreds. Joy during festivals could unite an entire city. Human feelings were considered powerful forces capable of influencing communities. Public speeches, songs, and ceremonies often aimed to shape these emotions. Many people thought that wisdom came slowly. Youth brought energy and ambition, but old age brought understanding. Philosophers frequently discussed the importance of experience because a long life exposed people to success, failure, love, grief, and hardship. These experiences created wisdom that books alone could never provide. The stars above Greece served as both clocks and stories. Farmers used them to determine planting seasons. Sailors used them for navigation. And poets used them to tell myths. Every constellation carried a tale about heroes, gods, monsters, or tragic events. Looking at the night sky meant seeing history written across the heavens. The Greeks often believed that beauty revealed hidden truths. A well-designed temple reflected cosmic order. A beautiful piece of music demonstrated harmony. A balanced body represented health and virtue. Beauty was not simply pleasant to observe. It revealed the underlying structure of the universe. Many cities held public ceremonies to remember victories, honor the dead, or celebrate important events. These rituals strengthened community bonds and reminded people that they belonged to something larger than themselves. Individual lives were temporary, but the city endured across generations. Citizens therefore felt responsibilities not only to themselves, but also to their ancestors and descendants. The Greeks also accepted uncertainty as part of life. Crops could fail, storms could destroy ships, and diseases could appear without warning. Since so much remained beyond human control, people sought guidance from the gods and accepted that some mysteries would never be fully understood. Fate existed partly because life itself was unpredictable. Many believed that words spoken in anger carried lasting consequences. Insults damaged honor. and broken promises weakened trust. Speech therefore required caution. Public speakers trained carefully because language possessed enormous power. A persuasive speech could influence an assembly, inspire soldiers, or change political decisions. The sound of waves along the coastline reminded many Greeks of the power of the sea gods. Entire communities depended upon fishing, trade, and travel. Yet the ocean remained dangerous. Every returning ship represented relief and gratitude. Families waiting for sailors often prayed daily for their safe return. The Greeks also thought that places could become sacred through events that happened there. A hill where a hero fought, a cave where a god appeared, or a spring where healing occurred might attract worshippers for generations. The landscape became filled with memories, legends, and spiritual significance. Many people believed that true courage involved accepting one's fate. Heroes often knew that danger awaited them, but continued forward anyway. This willingness to face inevitable hardships became one of the highest virtues. The purpose of life was not to avoid death, but to live honorably before death arrived. Food itself carried social and religious meaning. Meals brought families together, strengthened friendships, and honored the gods through small offerings. Bread, olives, wine, and fish were not simply sources of nourishment. They connected people to the land, the seasons, and the divine powers believed to provide them. The Greeks often saw life as a journey rather than a destination. Childhood, adulthood, marriage, parenthood, and old age represented stages through which everyone passed. Rituals marked these transitions, helping individuals move from one stage to another. Human life followed patterns, just as the seasons followed one another. Many philosophers taught that happiness came from living according to nature and reason. Wealth and power could disappear, but wisdom remained valuable. A person who understood themselves, respected the gods, and behaved honorably could live well even without great riches. The Greeks also believed that communities survived because individuals accepted their responsibilities. Citizens defended cities, parents raised children, priests maintained rituals, and elders shared knowledge. Society depended upon cooperation and tradition. When people neglected their duties, disorder followed. Even laughter had limits. While festivals encouraged joy and celebration, constant indulgence was discouraged. Moderation remained one of the most admired qualities. The Greeks repeatedly warned against extremes because they believed balance produced stability and happiness. Many people viewed nature as both beautiful and dangerous. Mountains provided protection but also isolation. Forests supplied wood but concealed wild animals. The sea offered wealth but threatened death. Human beings lived within nature, rather than apart from it, and survival required respect for its power. As evening fell across ancient Greece, oil lamps illuminated homes while families gathered together. Stories were told, prayers were spoken, and plans for the next day were discussed. Outside, stars filled the sky. Temple fires glowed in the distance, and the sounds of insects and waves carried through the darkness. People went to sleep believing that dreams might bring messages, that the gods continued to watch over them, and that fate quietly guided every human life. The remarkable thing about ancient Greece is not that people believed these things. It is that these beliefs existed alongside remarkable achievements in philosophy, mathematics, architecture, literature, and politics. The same people who calculated geometric principles, debated logic, and studied the natural world also trusted prophecies, feared curses, and honored invisible gods. To modern minds, these ideas may seem contradictory. To the Greeks, they were simply different parts of the same reality. Reason explained some things, tradition explained others, and the gods explained the rest. Their world contained both logic and mystery, both knowledge and faith. A farmer standing in his field, a sailor watching the horizon, a philosopher questioning the universe, and a mother putting her children to sleep, all shared a common belief that human life existed within a larger cosmic order. The gods, the stars, nature, fate, and humanity all belong to the same interconnected world, and so the ancient Greeks lived every day surrounded by meaning. The wind carried messages, dreams revealed warnings, stars told stories, and every action had consequences beyond what the eye could see. Their civilization may have vanished thousands of years ago, but the questions they asked about fate, purpose, mortality, and the unseen forces shaping human life continue to echo across history, just as they once echoed through the temples, marketplaces, and quiet olive groves of ancient Greece. Many Greeks also believed that every home existed under the protection of invisible forces. The doorway was not simply an entrance. It marked the boundary between safety and danger, family and strangers, order and chaos. Small rituals performed near entrances protected households from bad luck and unwanted spirits. Even sweeping the floor, lighting a lamp, or arranging objects within the home could possess symbolic meaning. When rain finally arrived after months of dry weather, people often thanked the gods openly. The sound of thunder across distant hills could bring both fear and relief. Since agriculture determined survival, weather felt deeply personal. A storm was not merely a natural event happening somewhere in the sky. It directly affected families, food supplies, and entire communities. Nature seemed to respond to human actions, prayers, and sacrifices. Many Greeks believed that memories themselves were sacred. The Muses, who inspired poetry, music, and knowledge, were connected to memory, because remembering allowed civilization to survive. Without memory, laws disappeared, traditions vanished, and families forgot their ancestors. Poets became important, not only because they entertained people, but because they preserved the past. The Greeks also believed that loneliness could be dangerous. Human beings were meant to live within families, villages, and cities. Isolation separated people from religious rituals, friendships, and shared traditions. A person completely removed from society was often viewed with suspicion because community formed the foundation of life. Many people feared angering the gods through carelessness rather than deliberate wrongdoing. Forgetting a sacrifice, neglecting a festival, or ignoring a religious duty could create problems. Therefore, rituals provided reassurance. By following traditions correctly, people felt they maintained harmony with the divine world. The passing of generations fascinated the Greeks. Grandparents remembered events that children had never seen. Parents inherited stories from ancestors and passed them onward. Human life appeared short compared to the age of cities, temples, and mountains. This awareness encouraged people to think about how they would be remembered after death. The Greeks often compared human beings to leaves falling from trees. One generation appeared while another disappeared. Seasons changed. Children grew older, and old people passed away. Yet life continued. This understanding created both sadness and acceptance. Mortality was unavoidable, but humanity itself endured. Many Greeks believed that cities possessed personalities. Athens was associated with wisdom, Sparta with discipline, Corinth with trade, and other cities with their own traditions and gods. Citizens felt strong loyalty to their communities because the city provided identity, protection, and belonging. Public spaces served important functions beyond commerce. Marketplaces became places where people exchanged news, debated ideas, discussed politics, and shared stories. Philosophers walked among ordinary citizens, asking questions about justice, virtue, and happiness. Ideas traveled through conversation rather than books alone. The Greeks also believed that certain individuals were favored by fortune. A successful athlete, a wise ruler, or a talented poet might appear touched by divine blessing. However, fortune could disappear quickly. Today's victor could become tomorrow's failure. This uncertainty encouraged humility. Many people thought that time itself moved in circles. Seasons repeated. Festivals returned each year, and families followed familiar patterns. Unlike modern ideas of constant progress, the Greeks often viewed life as a series of recurring cycles. Birth followed death, spring followed winter, and new generations replaced old ones. The sounds of temples became familiar parts of everyday life. Prayers, music, chanting, and sacrifices filled religious spaces. Festivals brought crowds together, creating moments when entire communities experienced the same emotions. These shared experiences strengthened social bonds and reinforced common beliefs. The Greeks frequently reflected upon the difference between appearance and reality. A person who seemed powerful might secretly be weak. Good fortune could hide future disaster. Beautiful words might conceal dangerous intentions. This awareness appears throughout their stories and philosophy, teaching people to look beyond first impressions. Many believed that wisdom required accepting uncertainty. Human beings could not know everything. The gods possessed greater knowledge, and fate often remained hidden. Therefore, people learned to live with unanswered questions. Philosophers searched for truth, but they also recognized the limits of human understanding. The sea remained one of the greatest teachers. Sailors learned patience because weather could not be controlled. They learned humility because storms could destroy even the strongest ships. They learned courage because voyages required facing unknown dangers. The ocean constantly reminded people of human limitations. The Greeks also valued friendship deeply. Friends shared meals, conversations, hardships, and celebrations. Loyalty between companions was considered one of life's greatest blessings. Stories often praised those who remained faithful during difficult times. Friendship helped people endure suffering and find meaning. Many people believed that every action carried consequences extending beyond the present moment. A decision made today might affect future generations. Honorable behavior preserved family reputation, while shameful actions damaged descendants. This long view encouraged responsibility and caution. Children heard stories about heroes who faced impossible challenges. These tales taught that courage did not mean the absence of fear. Heroes often experienced doubt, grief, and suffering. Their greatness came from continuing despite difficulties. Ordinary people found inspiration in these examples. The Greeks often described life as a voyage across uncertain waters. Some journeys were calm, while others encountered storms. No one could fully control the destination, but everyone could choose how to respond to changing conditions. This metaphor reflected their experiences as sailors and traders living beside the sea. Many people believed that gratitude pleased the gods. Thanking divine powers for success, health, and safety maintained good relationships with the unseen world. Gratitude also reminded individuals that life contained gifts as well as hardships. As darkness settled over villages and cities, oil lamps created small circles of light. Within homes outside, stars filled the sky above mountains, fields, and coastlines. Families gathered together while storytellers repeated ancient tales that connected the living with gods, heroes, and ancestors. The Greeks knew that human life was fragile. Disease could spread quickly, wars could begin suddenly, and accidents could happen without warning. Yet rather than seeing life as meaningless, they filled it with rituals, traditions, stories, and beliefs that provided comfort and purpose. A farmer planting seeds, a sailor raising a sail, a child listening to myths, or an old woman praying beside a household fire all participated in the same worldview. The gods watched from above, fate guided human lives, and nature itself spoke through signs and symbols. Even ordinary moments contained meaning. A sunrise marked renewal. A shared meal strengthened family bonds. A dream suggested hidden messages. A festival united the community. The changing seasons reminded people of life's cycles. Every experience connected human beings to something larger than themselves. Perhaps that is why ancient Greek culture continues to fascinate people thousands of years later. Their world was filled with questions about destiny, mortality, justice, courage, and the relationship between humans and the divine. They searched for answers through myths, philosophy, religion, and observation. To them, nothing existed entirely by accident. The stars above, the sea below, the changing winds, the voices of poets, the wisdom of elders, and the stories of heroes all formed part of a single universe. Human beings lived within that universe, guided by fate, watched by the gods, and surrounded by mysteries that could never be completely understood. And so the ancient Greeks woke each morning beneath the Mediterranean sun, believing that their lives mattered not only to their families and cities, but also to the gods themselves. Their hopes, fears, victories, and losses became part of a larger story stretching from the heavens to the earth, from the distant past to generations yet unborn. In that world, the strange beliefs that surprise modern readers were simply the ordinary truths by which millions of people lived their lives for centuries. Many Greeks also believed that every home existed under the protection of invisible forces. The doorway was not simply an entrance. It marked the boundary between safety and danger, family and strangers, order and chaos. Small rituals performed near entrances protected households from bad luck and unwanted spirits. Even sweeping the floor, lighting a lamp, or arranging objects within the home could possess symbolic meaning. When rain finally arrived after months of dry weather, people often thanked the gods openly. The sound of thunder across distant hills could bring both fear and relief. Since agriculture determined survival, weather felt deeply personal. A storm was not merely a natural event happening somewhere in the sky. It directly affected families, food supplies, and entire communities. Nature seemed to respond to human actions, prayers, and sacrifices. Many Greeks believed that memories themselves were sacred. The Muses, who inspired poetry, music, and knowledge, were connected to memory because remembering allowed civilization to survive. Without memory, laws disappeared, traditions vanished, and families forgot their ancestors. Poets became important not only because they entertained people, but because they preserved the past. The Greeks also believed that loneliness could be dangerous. Human beings were meant to live within families, villages, and cities. Isolation separated people from religious rituals, friendships, and shared traditions. A person completely removed from society was often viewed with suspicion because community formed the foundation of life. Many people feared angering the gods through carelessness rather than deliberate wrongdoing. Forgetting a sacrifice, neglecting a festival, or ignoring a religious duty could create problems. Therefore, rituals provided reassurance. By following traditions correctly, people felt they maintained harmony with the divine world. The passing of generations fascinated the Greeks. Grandparents remembered events that children had never seen. Parents inherited stories from ancestors and passed them onward. Human life appeared short compared to the age of cities, temples, and mountains. This awareness encouraged people to think about how they would be remembered after death. The Greeks often compared human beings to leaves falling from trees. One generation appeared while another disappeared. Seasons changed, children grew older, and old people passed away. Yet life continued. This understanding created both sadness and acceptance. Mortality was unavoidable, but humanity itself endured. Many Greeks believed that cities possessed personalities. Athens was associated with wisdom, Sparta with discipline, Corinth with trade, and other cities with their own traditions and gods. Citizens felt strong loyalty to their communities because the city provided identity, protection, and belonging. Public spaces served important functions beyond commerce. Marketplaces became places where people exchanged news, debated ideas, discussed politics, and shared stories. Philosophers walked among ordinary citizens, asking questions about justice, virtue, and happiness. Ideas travelled through conversation rather than books alone. The Greeks also believed that certain individuals were favoured by fortune. A successful athlete, a wise ruler, or a talented poet might appear touched by divine blessing. However, fortune could disappear quickly. Today's victor could become tomorrow's failure. This uncertainty encouraged humility. Many people thought that time itself moved in circles. Seasons repeated, festivals returned each year, and families followed familiar patterns. Unlike modern ideas of constant progress, the Greeks often viewed life as a series of recurring cycles. Birth followed death, spring followed winter, and new generations replaced old ones. The sounds of temples became familiar parts of everyday life. Prayers, music, chanting, and sacrifices filled religious spaces. Festivals brought crowds together, creating moments when entire communities experienced the same emotions. These shared experiences strengthened social bonds and reinforced common beliefs. The Greeks frequently reflected upon the difference between appearance and reality. A person who seemed powerful might secretly be weak. Good fortune could hide future disaster. Beautiful words might conceal dangerous intentions. This awareness appears throughout their stories and philosophy, teaching people to look beyond first impressions. Many believed that wisdom required accepting uncertainty. Human beings could not know everything. The gods possessed greater knowledge, and fate often remained hidden. Therefore, people learned to live with answered questions. Philosophers searched for truth, but they also recognized the limits of human understanding. The sea remained one of the greatest teachers. Sailors learned patience because weather could not be controlled. They learned humility because storms could destroy even the strongest ships. They learned courage because voyages required facing unknown dangers. The ocean constantly reminded people of human limitations. The Greeks also valued friendship deeply. Friends shared meals, conversations, hardships, and celebrations. Loyalty between companions was considered one of life's greatest blessings. Stories often praised those who remained faithful during difficult times. Friendship helped people endure suffering and find meaning. Many people believed that every action carried consequences extending beyond the present moment. A decision made today might affect future generations. Honorable behavior preserved family reputation, while shameful actions damaged descendants. This long view encouraged responsibility and caution. Children heard stories about heroes who faced impossible challenges. These tales taught that courage did not mean the absence of fear. Heroes often experienced doubt, grief, and suffering. Their greatness came from continuing despite difficulties. Ordinary people found inspiration in these examples. The Greeks often described life as a voyage across uncertain waters. Some journeys were calm, while others encountered storms. No one could fully control the destination, but everyone could choose how to respond to changing conditions. This metaphor reflected their experiences as sailors and traders living beside the sea. Many people believed that gratitude pleased the gods. Thanking divine powers for success, health, and safety maintained good relationships with the unseen world. Gratitude also reminded individuals that life contained gifts as well as hardships. As darkness settled over villages and cities, oil lamps created small circles of light within homes. Outside, stars filled the sky above mountains, fields, and coastlines. Families gathered together while storytellers repeated ancient tales that connected the living with gods, heroes, and ancestors. The Greeks knew that human life was fragile. Disease could spread quickly, wars could begin suddenly, and accidents could happen without warning. Yet rather than seeing life as meaningless, they filled it with rituals, traditions, stories, and beliefs that provided comfort and purpose. A farmer planting seeds, a sailor raising a sail, a child listening to myths, or an old woman praying beside a household fire, all participated in the same worldview. The gods watched from above, fate guided human lives, and nature itself spoke through signs and symbols. Even ordinary moments contained meaning. A sunrise marked renewal. A shared meal strengthened family bonds. A dream suggested hidden messages. A festival united the community. The changing seasons reminded people of life cycles. Every experience connected human beings to something larger than themselves. Perhaps that is why ancient Greek culture continues to fascinate people thousands of years later. Their world was filled with questions about destiny, mortality, justice, courage, and the relationship between humans and the divine. They searched for answers through myths, philosophy, religion, and observation. To them, nothing existed entirely by accident. The stars above, the sea below, the changing winds, the voices of poets, the wisdom of elders, and the stories of heroes all formed part of a single universe. Human beings lived within that universe, guided by fate, watched by the gods, and surrounded by mysteries that could never be completely understood. And so the ancient Greeks woke each morning beneath the Mediterranean sun, believing that their lives mattered, not only to their families and cities, but also to the gods themselves. Their hopes, fears, victories, and losses became part of a larger story stretching from the heavens to the earth, from the distant past to generations yet unborn. In that world, the strange beliefs that surprise modern readers were simply the ordinary truths by which millions of people lived their lives for centuries. Many Greeks also believed that the world had once been closer to the gods than it was in their own time. They spoke of ancient ages when heroes walked among divine beings, when monsters roamed the earth, and when extraordinary events happened regularly. Their own age seemed smaller and less magnificent than the distant past. Old stories described stronger men, greater kings, and more powerful cities. This belief gave enormous importance to tradition, because the past was often viewed as wiser than the present. When elderly people spoke about earlier generations, younger listeners paid close attention. Experience was respected because older individuals had survived wars, famines, diseases, and hardships. They remembered events that no books recorded. Their memories connected living people to ancestors who had long since disappeared. The wisdom of age carried authority because it had been tested by time. The Greeks also believed that human beings constantly stood between order and chaos. Cities represented order, laws, and civilization. Beyond the city, walls lay forests, mountains, and unknown lands where danger and uncertainty existed. The wilderness inspired both fear and fascination. It was the home of wild animals, bandits, strange tribes, and mythical creatures. Stories often began when heroes left the safety of civilization and entered the unknown. Many people believed that suffering was unavoidable, but not meaningless. Hardships could reveal character, teach wisdom, and strengthen communities. A poor harvest taught patience. Illness taught gratitude for health. War reminded people of the value of peace. Difficulties became part of the human experience rather than exceptions to it. The Greeks often measured wealth differently from modern societies. Owning land, maintaining a respected family name, having loyal friends, and producing honourable children were all considered forms of wealth. Money mattered, but reputation and social standing often mattered even more. A person could be poor yet respected, or rich yet dishonoured. Many believed that wisdom involved knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Excessive talking suggested poor judgment. Careful words demonstrated self-control. Philosophers often spent long periods questioning ideas before offering conclusions. The ability to listen became as important as the ability to speak. The changing seasons deeply influenced emotions. Spring brought hope because life returned to the fields. Summer represented work and abundance. Autumn signaled harvest and preparation. Winter brought hardship, reflection, and waiting. Human life seemed connected to these natural cycles. Youth resembled spring. Maturity resembled summer. Old age resembled autumn. And death resembled winter. The Greeks also believed that some knowledge belonged only to the gods. Humans could study nature, ask questions, and seek wisdom, but complete understanding remained impossible. This belief encouraged humility, because even the greatest thinkers recognized the limits of human intelligence. Many people admired individuals who remained calm during difficulties. Self-control represented strength. Anger, panic, and fear could lead to poor decisions. Heroes often succeeded because they mastered their emotions rather than allowing emotions to control them. The sea continued to influence Greek imagination. Looking across the horizon, people saw mystery. Beyond familiar waters lay distant lands, unknown peoples, and hidden dangers. Every voyage became a journey into uncertainty. Sailors returned with stories that expanded the boundaries of the known world. The Greeks frequently discussed whether happiness came from external circumstances or internal character. A wealthy person could still suffer. A poor person could still experience contentment. Philosophers argued that true happiness depended upon wisdom, moderation, and virtue rather than possessions alone. Many believed that beautiful speech reflected a beautiful mind. Education focused heavily on rhetoric because words could inspire, persuade, and teach. Public speaking became an essential skill. Political leaders, philosophers, and teachers all relied upon language to influence others. The Greeks also thought that every person possessed a role within society. Farmers grew food, craftsmen created tools, sailors transported goods, soldiers defended cities, and teachers educated the young. Society functioned because individuals fulfilled their responsibilities. Children grew up hearing stories about courage, loyalty, and honor. These stories shaped their understanding of right and wrong. Heroes became examples of both virtues and mistakes. Their successes inspired admiration, while their failures taught caution. Many people believed that nature itself contained lessons. Ants demonstrated hard work. Bees showed cooperation. Trees illustrated patience and endurance. The sea taught humility. Observing the natural world helped people understand human behavior. The Greeks often viewed friendship as one of life's greatest blessings. Loyal companions shared hardships, offered advice, and provided support during difficult times. Friendships created bonds that could last entire lifetimes. Betrayal therefore caused deep emotional pain. Many believed that old age offered opportunities for reflection. As physical strength declined, wisdom and experience increased. Older people often spent more time discussing philosophy, religion, and the meaning of life. The final years became a period of contemplation. The stars above Greece seemed eternal. Generations came and went. Cities rose and fell. But the heavens remained unchanged. Looking at the night sky reminded people that human life was temporary, while the universe endured. This perspective encouraged both humility and wonder. The Greeks also believed that moderation created stability. Too much wealth produced greed. Too much power encouraged tyranny. Too much pleasure weakened character. Balance remained the ideal. A moderate life offered the greatest chance for happiness. Many people accepted uncertainty as a permanent part of existence. No one could predict tomorrow completely. Storms might appear, diseases might spread, or fortunes might change. Since life remained unpredictable, courage and adaptability became important qualities. The sounds of everyday life, waves against the shore, animals in the fields, merchants in the marketplace, children playing, and prayers rising from temples formed the rhythm of Greek society. These familiar sounds connected people to their communities and traditions. The Greeks frequently reflected upon the passage of time. Children became adults, parents became grandparents, and old generations disappeared. Watching these changes reminded people that life moved continuously forward. Yet traditions, stories, and memories created continuity between generations. Many believed that true greatness involved serving something larger than oneself. This could mean serving the city, the family, the gods, or future generations. Personal success mattered, but contributing to the community mattered even more. As night returned and lamps illuminated homes across Greece, families gathered to eat, talk, and remember. Outside, the stars slowly crossed the sky above mountains, temples, and quiet villages. The same constellations that guided sailors and inspired poets shone over everyone. People prepared for sleep, knowing that dreams might carry messages, that tomorrow remained uncertain, and that the gods continued watching over human affairs. Life was fragile, but it was also meaningful. Every action, every relationship, and every choice existed within a larger cosmic order. The remarkable achievement of ancient Greece was not simply its philosophy, architecture, or literature. It was the ability to combine reason with mystery, logic with faith, and observation with imagination. The Greeks sought explanations for the world while also accepting that some mysteries would always remain. They built temples and theatres, studied mathematics and medicine, wrote poetry and philosophy, sailed across dangerous seas, and raised families beneath the Mediterranean sun. Throughout all these activities, they believed that invisible forces shaped human destiny. To modern people, these beliefs may seem unusual, but to the ancient Greeks they felt completely natural. The stars above, the earth below, the sea beyond the horizon, and the gods watching from unseen realms all formed part of a single living universe. And so, generation after generation, the people of ancient Greece woke each morning, believing that they were never truly alone. The dead remembered them. The gods observed them. Nature spoke to them, and fate guided them. Their world was filled with meaning, wonder, fear, and hope. As the last lamps went dark, and the Mediterranean night grew quiet, countless Greeks closed their eyes, believing that dreams might reveal hidden truths, and that the universe itself remained alive around them. For them, this was not mythology, it was reality, and it shaped every moment of their lives from birth until death. Many Greeks also believed that the very air around them was filled with unseen powers. A sudden chill, an unusual silence, or a strange feeling while walking alone could be interpreted as a sign that something supernatural was nearby. Certain locations felt sacred, while others inspired fear. A lonely grove at sunset, an abandoned temple, or a cave hidden in the mountains might seem occupied by invisible beings. People trusted their feelings because they believed the world constantly revealed hidden truths to those willing to notice them. The Greeks often viewed human life as extremely fragile. A healthy man could become sick within days. A strong ship could disappear during a storm. A successful city could lose a war and fall into ruin. Since security could vanish quickly, people learned to appreciate temporary happiness. Celebrations, friendships, and family gatherings became especially important because no one knew how long good fortune would last. Many people believed that grief should be shared. Funerals brought communities together because death affected everyone. Women often sang mourning songs, relatives gathered around the deceased, and neighbors offered support. Public expressions of sorrow were accepted because grief connected the living to those who had died. Tears were not signs of weakness, but reminders of love and loss. The Greeks also believed that every generation had a duty to preserve the traditions inherited from the past. Temples needed repair, festivals required organization, and stories had to be retold. Forgetting the past threatened the future. The survival of a city depended not only upon soldiers and laws, but also upon memory. Many individuals believed that the gods observed not only great actions, but also ordinary behavior. Honesty in business, kindness towards strangers, respect for parents, and loyalty to friends all mattered. A person did not need to be a king or hero to attract divine attention. Everyday actions revealed character. The Greeks often thought of the human soul as something that desired knowledge. Curiosity was natural because people wanted to understand themselves and the world around them. Philosophers spent years asking questions that had no simple answers. What is justice? What is happiness? What happens after death? These questions fascinated people because they touched the deepest parts of human existence. Many believed that envy was dangerous because it destroyed relationships and disturbed social harmony. A successful person might avoid boasting to prevent jealousy from others. Humility protected individuals from both human resentment and divine punishment. Excessive pride remained one of the greatest dangers. The Greeks also admired endurance during difficult times. A farmer surviving a drought, a sailor surviving a storm, or a family surviving hardship earned respect. Strength was measured not only by victories, but by the ability to continue despite suffering. Life often demanded patience and resilience. Many people believed that the earth itself was sacred because it provided food, shelter, and life. Farmers thanked the gods for harvests because they understood their dependence upon nature. A failed crop could mean hunger, while a successful harvest brought celebration. Agriculture connected people directly to the cycles of the natural world. The Greeks frequently discussed the importance of reputation. Since communities were relatively small, people knew one another well. A person's actions became known throughout the city. Honor and shame therefore carried tremendous importance. Good behavior strengthened family reputation, while dishonorable actions affected future generations. Many believed that wisdom involved accepting what could not be changed while improving what could be controlled. Weather, fate, and death remained beyond human power, but courage, honesty, and self-discipline remained personal choices. This distinction influenced philosophy and daily life. The Greeks also found meaning in ordinary work. Farmers, potters, fishermen, builders, and craftsmen contributed to society. Work provided not only survival, but also identity and purpose. Skill and dedication earned respect regardless of occupation. Many people thought that silence beneath the stars encouraged reflection. Without artificial lights, the night sky appeared extraordinarily bright. Countless stars stretched across the heavens, reminding people of the vastness of the universe. Looking upward inspired wonder and humility. The Greeks frequently viewed life as a temporary gift rather than a permanent possession. Since everything eventually changed, gratitude became important. A healthy child, a safe journey, a good harvest, or a loyal friend represented blessings that deserved appreciation. Many believed that courage and wisdom were equally important. Strength without intelligence could become dangerous, while intelligence without courage achieved little. The ideal person combined both qualities, using reason to guide action. The sea remained a constant reminder of uncertainty. Calm waters could become violent without warning. This unpredictability shaped Greek attitudes toward life itself. One could prepare carefully, but complete control remained impossible. The Greeks also believed that communities became stronger when people shared common traditions. Festivals, rituals, songs, and stories created unity. During religious celebrations, citizens experienced the same emotions and remembered the same myths. These shared experiences helped cities survive difficult times. Many people accepted that human beings would always struggle with fear, anger, jealousy, and desire. The purpose of philosophy and education was not to eliminate these emotions, but to manage them wisely. Self-control became a sign of maturity. The changing seasons reminded people that life itself followed natural cycles. Birth, growth, aging, and death seemed as inevitable as spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Understanding these cycles helped people accept the realities of existence. Many Greeks believed that every individual possessed some responsibility toward future generations. Parents taught children, teachers educated students, and elders shared experience. Knowledge survived because people passed it forward. The sound of waves against rocky shores, the rustling of olive trees, the songs of birds at sunrise, and the wind moving through mountains became familiar parts of life. Nature surrounded people constantly, shaping both their practical lives and their spiritual beliefs. The Greeks often reflected upon the difference between wealth and happiness. A rich person could still experience grief, while a poor person might enjoy friendship and contentment. Philosophers repeatedly argued that character mattered more than possessions. Many believed that human beings occupied only a small place within a much larger universe. The stars, the sea, the mountains, and the gods existed long before any individual was born. This perspective encouraged humility, while also inspiring awe. As evening approached, smoke rose from homes as families prepared meals. Children listened to stories, elders shared memories, and neighbors spoke together beneath the fading light. The first stars appeared above the hills while distant temple fires glowed in the darkness. People prepared for sleep, believing that dreams might reveal truths hidden during the day. The world became quieter, but it did not become empty. Gods still watched, ancestors still remembered, and fate continued guiding human lives. The remarkable thing about ancient Greece is that ordinary people lived with extraordinary ideas every day. A fisherman casting his nets believed the sea had divine powers. A farmer planting seeds believed the gods influenced the harvest. A mother raising children believed ancestors watched over the family. A philosopher studying the stars believed the universe contained hidden order. Their civilization combined practical knowledge with spiritual belief, reason with mystery, and observation with imagination. They built cities, wrote poems, fought wars, and raised families, while believing that the world around them was alive with meaning. And so, beneath the warm Mediterranean sun and the endless night sky, generation after generation lived their lives convinced that every storm, every dream, every victory, and every loss formed part of a greater story. The gods remained close, fate remained powerful, and the universe itself seemed filled with signs waiting to be understood. What modern people might call unusual beliefs were, to the ancient Greeks, simply the ordinary truths that shaped every day of their existence.